My name is Skylar Dawson. I'm 37 and live alone in Portland, Oregon. To outsiders, my family looks like the perfect American household. Big, close-knit, full of traditions. But inside that house, I was never truly seen as part of it. I'm the eldest of three. Madison, the youngest at 26, is still jobless, but adored like the little angel. Dylan, the middle child at 33, has 2 divorces behind him and nearly $40,000 in credit card debt. Yet my mom still calls him the generous one. And me? I've always been the responsible one. Since childhood, I handled everything. Made dinner when mom worked late, picked Dylan up from basketball, helped Madison glue pieces of her science project when she cried after being teased at school. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, if I carried enough weight, I'd finally be treated like a real daughter. Not just a human tool the family unconsciously relied on to function. I was the only kid who knew when tuition was due, who had seafood allergies, and whose driver's license needed renewing. Whenever something went wrong, power outages, late bills, even the neighbor's dog going missing, my parents turned to me like I was their personal crisis hotline. Skylar, I don't know how to open this email attachment. Can you print it for me? Skylar, your brother needs a ride to the airport at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Can you take him? Skylar, I know you have meetings this week, but can you pick up Madison's wedding cake? I've got a migraine. And I did it all, without complaining. Because I thought that's how love worked. I still remember my 35th birthday. It was a Monday, pouring rain, no text, no call, nothing. But the next day, I still showed up at Madison's office with the proposal she'd asked me to edit over the weekend. She gave me a distracted hug, eyes glued to her phone. And me? I felt thankful. Pathetically thankful. That she even remembered my name. I once gave Dylan $7,000 for an emergency loan I never saw again. I co-signed on an SUV Madison bought just because it looked more Instagrammable, even though I hated the shallow image she chased. I used to think, they're not doing this on purpose, they're just used to me always being here. But slowly, incident by incident, I started to realize something harsher. My family didn't see me as a person with feelings, limits, or needs. I was a tool. A fix. The cleanup crew. One day, I asked my mom a simple question. Whether I could skip the weekend gathering because I was exhausted after a brutal shift. She sighed, full of disappointment. You're always busy. You never think about your family. That sentence cut deeper than she knew. All those years of sacrifice, of trading solitude for duty, they weren't appreciated, they were expected. That was the turning point. I saw it clearly. If I stopped being useful, they'd stop including me. And worse, the bitter truth? I was never chosen, just used. My presence in their lives was transactional, but I started to change. Not by shouting or demanding fairness, but by quietly withdrawing, one step at a time. I stopped sending money when Dylan texted, urgent. I didn't return Madison's call about her last-minute website mock-up. I ignored Mom's text. Skylar, your dad needs help scanning a... I didn't disappear. I simply stopped existing as their shadow. 1 week before Thanksgiving, I was sitting in a small cafe in the Alberta Arts District, tweaking slides for a Monday morning pitch when my phone rang. It was Lydia, my maternal cousin, and the only relative who still shared family gossip like it was breaking news. Sky, did you hear? This year's Thanksgiving is happening at your parents' place, right? I kept my eyes on the laptop. Yeah. Why? What are you planning to wear? I paused. Lydia, what's going on? I don't know anything. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Skylar, you're not on the list. I saw the group email. Everyone got copied. Cousins, uncles, aunts. Except you. My heart skipped. For a moment, I hoped it was just a tech glitch. I called my mom directly. She answered in her usual flat tone. I'm in the middle of making pecan pie. What's going on? Why wasn't I invited? I asked, straight to the point. Silence. A long, heavy pause. Well, this year, your dad and I wanted to keep it small, just close family. Fewer people means less stress. I furrowed my brow. I am your daughter, not some distant cousin. I know, Skylar, but you've been so busy. Lately you've seemed distant. We thought you could use some rest. And don't forget, last year you only stayed for 2 hours. Because I had to go back to work at the hospital, I snapped, and I paid for the entire meal. She said nothing. I sent over more than $1,200 3 weeks ago, I continued, voice cold. I placed the turkey order with Johnson's Farm, the Southern Spile stuffing from Ethel's, and the pumpkin cheesecake from Sweet Nest. The whole order was under my name. The delivery address? Your house? You did it to help, she said softly. But inviting you, that was a separate decision. The rage boiled under my skin. I forced a deep breath to keep myself from yelling in the cafe. Family? You mean the people who need my money, but don't want my presence? I hung up. That night, I opened my order confirmation emails. I hadn't just chipped in. I paid for the whole thing. No one thanked me. No one asked if I'd be there. They just assumed I'd fund it. And quietly erased me from the table I set. I called Johnson's Farm, the ones delivering the 16-pound organic turkey my mom insisted on every year. Hi, Ms. Dawson. The rep greeted me warmly. Would you like to update your order? No, I'd like to cancel it. There was a pause. It's a custom order and we're pretty close to the date. Is there a specific reason? I was uninvited from the meal I paid for. Is that reason enough? My voice was flat, but inside, a fire raged. I did the same with Ethel's and Sweet Nest. At first they hesitated. But once I sent receipts, my ID and the payment details, all under my name, they agreed to refund. On Thanksgiving morning, I stayed in my pajamas, poured myself a mug of hot apple cider, and watched a movie. At exactly 12:18 p.m., my phone rang. It was my dad. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Skylar, what happened with the order? Everyone's here waiting, nothing showed up. I feigned surprise. Really? That's odd. Maybe Mom should check with whoever placed it. You placed it? He barked. Did you cancel? I took a slow sip of cider and replied calmly. I assumed no one needed anything from me. I didn't say another word. I hung up as the chaos erupted on the other end. My mom's voice, Madison's shouting, Uncle Ron complaining, all swirling into a noisy storm of confusion and disappointment. I sat there in silence, staring out the window at Portland's cold gray sky. Outside, the last red leaves drifted lazily from the trees. In that moment, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I thought it would end there. A cold cancellation, an empty dinner table, a lesson deep enough to make them think twice. But I overestimated my family's sense of shame. That evening, after my dad's call, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Madison's texts came in rapid fire. Like popcorn in a microwave. Are you insane? Mom's crying in her room. Dylan had to drive all the way to Walmart in Medford for a frozen turkey, and today was supposed to be his day off. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I knew anything I said would be twisted into a new version of the story. I'd lived in this family long enough to understand. The one who defends herself is always called dramatic, petty, or divisive. I switched my phone to silent. The next morning, I opened Instagram and saw Madison's story, a long table set with whatever they could scramble together, captioned. When you have to cook because someone forgot to place the order. But family is still everything, grateful anyway. She didn't name me. But everyone knew who someone was. I just scoffed. 3 days later, I got a text from Mom, just one line. We missed you that day. Hope you're doing well. No apology, no ownership, not a single word about being excluded. It was the emotional equivalent of a throw blanket, not to comfort, but to cover up the mess. I didn't respond. Instead, I got an unexpected call from the only person in my family who'd never faked affection. Aunt Ruth. She's Mom's younger sister, lives in Eugene. Since I was little, she's quietly sent me birthday cards, hand-baked Christmas cookies, and never made promises she didn't keep. Her voice was low and steady. They really hurt you, didn't they, Sky? My throat tightened. I'd spent days acting strong, but just one well-placed question cracked it all open. I whispered, "They didn't invite me, Auntie. But they still let me pay for everything." Aunt Ruth sighed. "I heard, and honestly, it's not just you." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to go on. "Your mom has always been obsessed with appearances. She's terrified of anything that might expose the imperfections. So when someone goes off script, she calls it betrayal." Her words hit me like a fist to the chest, painful, but dead on. "You don't have to go back and suffer," she continued. "But if you do choose to show up again, make sure you get to write the next chapter. Don't let them finish your story for you." After that call, I started thinking. Not about revenge, but about reclaiming my voice. I was no longer the nodding daughter. And if they were going to pretend I didn't matter, I would make it impossible for them to keep ignoring me. A few days later, I asked a friend who worked in event planning to help me reprint all the receipts, my signature, their home address, every line item from the canceled Thanksgiving feast. I pasted them onto the back of a custom Thanksgiving card embossed with the words, "Thanks for showing me who was a guest and who was just the wallet." I mailed that card to every single relative who sat at that table. No comments, no explanations. Just a quiet reminder that silence doesn't equal ignorance. It's often just timing. That night, Dylan called. He never calls unless he needs money. His voice was uneasy. "You really sent that card?" "I did," I answered calmly. He gave a dry, nervous laugh. "Honestly? You scared the hell out of everyone. Mom says you're having a nervous breakdown. Madison says you're going through a late-life rebellion." I laughed. "And what do you think?" He exhaled. "I think maybe you were right. That table, it felt emptier than the missing food. It was missing the one person who always held it all together." I froze. Dylan had never said anything like that before. "Thank you," I said quietly. I didn't know if his words came from guilt or fear of being next. But it was something. A crack. And I knew, once the first crack appears, the wall doesn't stand for long. 2 days after I sent out that card, "Thanks for excluding me from the dinner I paid for," the Dawson family went into quiet panic mode. No one confronted me directly, but social media started humming with passive-aggressive noise. Vague posts from Madison like, "Some people just can't stand not being the center of the universe," and a picture from my mom showing a table of canned food with the caption, "Still thankful, even when your own leaves the whole family hungry." I didn't respond. Until I got a surprise call from Mom's longtime bridge partner, Helen, a woman who's played cards with her every Wednesday for 15 years. "Skylar, I don't mean to meddle," she said, her voice cautious, "but your mother's been telling people you're unstable, that you've been acting out, that you sabotaged Thanksgiving to punish the whole family." I went silent. Helen continued. "She's even said you've been in therapy, that you're under severe financial stress and not thinking clearly." My throat tightened. "I've never been in therapy, I'm not in debt, and I certainly didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped giving." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat at my kitchen table, staring into a cooling cup of tea, searching for an answer I already knew. In my family, anyone who calls out injustice is branded unstable. Anyone who stops sacrificing is labeled selfish. That night, I received a message from Emma, my paternal cousin. "It's Guy, I heard from Mom. People are saying you've changed. I hope you're okay. I replied simply. I am. For the first time in years, I truly am. But I knew the rumors were spreading. In our group chats, I started noticing the shift. Curious, veiled questions like, Skylar, are you still working at the hospital? Hope everything's okay with you these days. Each question felt like a tiny needle poking at the wall I was trying to rebuild. I didn't defend myself. I said nothing. No rebuttals, no clarifying posts. Instead, I kept my work schedule. Took early shifts, walked after dark with my old headphones, and kept sending handwritten thank you cards to my elderly patients after discharge. I lived my life. The one thing they couldn't manage or manipulate. Then I got a text from Ethan, my cousin who'd stayed quietly in touch since the fallout. Sky, there's something you should know. We met at a small vegan cafe near Alberta. When I arrived, he was already seated, glancing around like he was afraid someone might see us. Madison's been talking about you and your new boyfriend, he began, voice low. She said you're using him to make a statement. That you're bringing him to Christmas just to get back at the family. I looked at him, no longer angry, just tired. No one's asked how I'm really doing, I said quietly. They're too busy trying to spin a new story. Ethan nodded. I know, my mom told me what your mom's been saying. I hate to say this, but they're trying to paint you as losing control, to justify cutting you out of Thanksgiving. I straightened my back, a chill ran from my neck to the base of my spine. What do you think you can do? I asked. He paused, then said, I can't speak for you. But if you need someone to tell the truth, I'm here. I looked at my cousin. Under the soft cafe lighting, his face showed more guilt than I expected. Maybe he'd been quiet too long, too. I left that cafe without a plan for revenge. But I knew one thing. I won't let anyone write my life as a script I never agreed to. Christmas Eve, the air outside my parents' house in suburban Lake Oswego felt unusually sharp. The Oregon sky hung low, thick with gray clouds, and the snow barely clung to the stone steps, just enough to freeze, not enough to be beautiful. I stepped out of the car at exactly 6:17 p.m., my dark red wool coat swaying slightly in the wind. In my hand was another hand, smaller, thinner but solid like steel. You sure about this? My grandmother whispered. I nodded and rang the doorbell. Laughter, the clink of silverware, Madison's loud voice drifted from inside. Then the door swung open. My mother stood there. Her face froze solid, like a lake hit by winter wind. She looked at me, then at the woman beside me. Her gaze stalled, like she'd been slapped with a bucket of ice water. You brought her here? I smiled. I figured it was time people looked each other in the eye, without the fogged-up lens of the past. My grandmother. Evelyn adjusted her scarf. 78 and still standing tall, her silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, her eyes clear as glass. Hello, Helen, she said calmly, tilting her head. It's been a while. My mother pressed her lips into a thin line. You think this is the right moment? Absolutely, I said, stepping inside, guiding Grandma along. If you think someone you once called too toxic for family gatherings can ruin tonight, then maybe you understand how I felt a few weeks ago. The room fell dead silent. My father stood by the fireplace holding a glass of wine, his expression blank when he saw Grandma Evelyn. Madison, curled against her new boyfriend, let her forced smile dissolve as soon as her eyes met mine. Dylan furrowed his brow but said nothing. Grandma's gaze swept the room. Not confrontational, just cool and steady, like she'd walked into a restaurant she used to frequent long ago. Oh, you still have that clock I gave you, she said, pointing to the brass wall clock. Thought it had been sold or tossed by now. No one replied. I unwrapped my scarf and sank into the sofa like I belonged there. Merry Christmas, everyone! The air crackled with tension. But Grandma calmly sat at the dinner table, poured herself a glass of water, and nodded at each person, like it was just another warm holiday evening. "Are you doing well?" my father asked after a long silence. "Better than ever," she replied. "Though I was a bit sad not to receive an invite last year." My mother spun around. "You know why. You can't just show up like nothing ever happened." "Like nothing happened?" I repeated, my voice soft as breath. "Are you referring to cutting off Grandma after she refused to fund Dylan's coffee shop? Or calling her a troublemaker? Kind of like what you've been calling me lately." Mom's eyes lit with fury. "Don't drag up the past. This is—" "I'm talking about the present, Mom." I leaned forward, bracing my hands on the table. "The present. Where Grandma was erased from this family because she spoke the truth. Just like me." At that, Evelyn set her glass down and looked straight at her daughter. The woman now trembling, though I wasn't sure if it was from anger or fear. "Helen, I didn't come here to assign blame," she said. "I came for Skylar. She's lived years doing everything, being overlooked, and then called unstable just because she refused to stay quiet, just like me." Silence swept the room. Madison let go of her boyfriend's arm, muttered something, and stormed upstairs. Dylan looked at his shoes. My father swirled his wine as if it held answers. Finally, my mom stepped back a little. "Is this what tonight is? A group ambush?" I stood up. "No one's ambushing you. But you will face the consequences of your choices. No one in this room is willing to be rewritten in your version of the story just to protect appearances." Grandma gently placed her hand over mine. "We're not here to win. We're here to be heard. And to remind you that no one stays silent forever." I looked at her, then around the room. My eyes landed on my father, the man who hadn't said a word beyond his conflicted stare. "I don't need an apology," I said. "But I'm done disappearing. If anyone here finds my presence uncomfortable, then tonight is the last time they'll get to sit at a table I once served." No one responded. But in that silence, something shifted. And I knew. This time, the room would never settle back the same way again. 3 days after Christmas, I received a message from my mother. Short, clipped, and cold. No greeting, no punctuation. "Dinner at 6 on Sunday. Your father and I want to talk." I stared at those words on my screen for 5 full minutes. Not a single check-in after everything that had happened. No acknowledgement of the silence that had stretched the entire year. Just a summons. Like I was some wayward daughter who'd embarrassed them in front of the neighbors. I wasn't going to go, but then Aunt Ruth called. "Bye. If you feel strong enough, go. Not for them to talk at you, but for them to hear you. For once." So I went. At 6:12 p.m. on Sunday, I stepped through the iron gate of my parents' home. The place I once belonged to, but was never truly welcomed in. My father stood in the kitchen, white shirt buttoned to the collar, holding a mug of tea. No wine tonight. My mother sat at the head of the dining table as always, like she was hosting a board meeting. Dylan was there. Surprisingly. And someone I didn't expect. Emma. My paternal cousin, who had stayed silent through Thanksgiving and Christmas. No one said a word. It wasn't until I pulled out a chair across from my mother that she finally spoke. "Do you realize how much chaos you've caused?" I laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, just a reflex. I'd heard too many ridiculous lines to be shocked anymore. "Do you realize how I was cut from Thanksgiving?" I said evenly. "And instead of apologizing, you labeled me unstable? Told people I was struggling financially, that I needed help." My mother gripped the edge of the table, her manicured nails pressing into the wood. "I never meant to offend. I was worried. You went silent, cut contact, then showed up with her. The woman who severed ties with this family, decades ago. Grandma was exiled by you," I said slowly. just like me. We were both labeled difficult for not bowing to control. Dylan shifted in his seat. Emma glanced between us. The air thickened, heavy and ready to spill over. My father finally broke his silence, for the first time in months. "We're not here to fight. We're here to fix things." I turned to him. "Fix what, exactly, when no one's acknowledged the break?" My mother snapped. "Then what do you want? An apology?" "No," I replied, firmly. "I want you to face what you did. Without spinning it. Without excuses." Silence. Then she stood abruptly, eyes blazing. "I was ashamed," she exploded. "I didn't want people to know that you weren't obeying anymore, that you weren't silent. I did everything I could to preserve the image of this family, even if it meant sacrificing the one child who knew how to hold it all together." The room froze. I didn't feel pity, only clarity. For once, she had said the truth. No filters. No gaslighting. "I don't need you to apologize," I said. "I just need you to understand that from this point on, I'm not carrying this family's burden anymore. I'm not here to make it look perfect." She slumped back into her chair. My father said nothing, his eyes fixed on the far wall. Emma placed her hand on the table. "Skylar, I'm sorry. I knew things were off, but I didn't want to be the one to make things uncomfortable, and I was wrong." Dylan didn't speak, he just gave a small nod, and that tiny gesture meant more than any forced apology I'd ever heard. I stood up. "Don't expect you to change, I'm done hoping for that, but if you continue to rewrite my story to others, I won't stay quiet. You've used shame to control people your whole life. But I'm not ashamed anymore. Maybe you should try living with that feeling instead." I had stood tall, said everything I needed, without shaking. I walked out of that house as the clock struck exactly 7. The wind outside cut sharp across my face, but inside, for the first time in years, I felt warm. I never went back to that house again. Not out of anger, but because I no longer had a reason to walk through the door of a place that only knew how to demand, never how to understand. Since that dinner, my mother sent exactly 4 messages. The first, on Monday. "I think we both said too much, hope you'll reconsider." I didn't reply. The second, on Thursday. "Aunt Ruth is stirring up more division. Don't let her influence you." I quietly blocked her number. The last 2 came on New Year's Eve, 2 minutes apart. "It's a new year, let's not hold on to resentment. Your father says if you don't reach out, he's deleting your number." I didn't reread them. I saved all 4 in a folder on my computer titled Evidence of Peace. Instead of reacting, I took action. I changed my phone number, got a new SIM card, shared only with the people I truly trusted. I left every family group chat without saying a word. I also transferred $500 to Aunt Ruth, as a quiet thank you for standing by me when no one else did. She mailed back a handwritten note. "Blood or not, I'm proud of you, for standing tall with your dignity intact." I taped it to the side of my bedroom mirror. Every week, I met Grandma Evelyn. Sometimes at her favorite Italian sandwich shop, sometimes just to walk around Union Lake. We didn't talk much about my mom. Instead, she told me stories. Like the time she refused marriage to a man just because he reminded her too much of her controlling father. I cried laughing when she admitted to hiding hair dye inside an oven to keep her brothers from tattling to Grandpa. I also started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I needed a safe space to untangle the knots that had tightened around my life for decades. In the very first session, I told my therapist, "I don't want to learn how to forgive them. I just want to stop feeling guilty for choosing myself." He nodded, then said, "Then we'll begin with this, learning the difference between silence and boundaries." And I did learn, day by day. I rewrote my work schedule. I stopped taking weekend shifts unless absolutely necessary. I started growing vegetables in wooden planters on my balcony. I bought an old ukulele from a flea market and taught myself basic chords on YouTube. Even though my fingers ached so much I nearly quit. But I kept going. Because this time, I was doing it for me. Not as a chore, not for approval. I started journaling. Words I had never dared to say. I didn't write to be read. I wrote to stop feeling like I had to carry everything in silence. By February, I got a message from Emma, my cousin who had apologized during that defining dinner. I left the family group chat today. I finally understand why you went quiet. If you're open to it, I'd like to invite you over, just the two of us. I said yes. That night wasn't fancy. She made vegetarian lasagna, poured cheap red wine, and played soft jazz from an old Bluetooth speaker. But it was the first dinner in years where I didn't have to tense up to keep the peace. No forced smiles. No walking on eggshells. We talked about work, her new relationship, and the time she caught Madison using my name to apply for funding through an organization I'd never heard of. I shook my head. Then, I laughed. I'll speak the truth from now on, Emma said. I promise. I nodded. You don't need to promise. Just do what's right when no one else will. That night, I went home, looked around my small apartment. Wooden floors I cleaned myself, a slightly crooked painting I hung alone. Everything in that space was mine. Earned, chosen, built. No one gave it to me, no one could take it back. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop and started typing a new document. The first line I wrote. Rule for self-respect. If you don't help nourish it, you don't get to destroy it. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I hit save. No one can force me to forgive. No one can stop me from walking away. And if they throw another dinner someday, and my chair is empty, it's no longer a seat meant for me. It's a reminder of someone who once carried everything, but now knows how to set it down and walk away with hands finally free. Skylar's story is a powerful reminder that clarity and strength don't always come from loud confrontations, but from deliberate silence and firm boundaries. In real life, many of us play the role of the reliable one, only to be overlooked until we finally walk away. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's how you reclaim peace and self-respect that's long been denied. What do you think about Skylar's decision? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and real-life resilience.